because I got an audition for a Claude,
Oh, nice.
VO with thing, but I didn't book it because it was like, "Here's the audition on" I think it was "Here's the audition on Thursday," and they were like, "Yeah, if we book you, we need to record, like, Friday morning, so you need to be, like, available," was it 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Friday morning,
Ooh,
to
yeah.
at a minute's notice for them to be like, "Yeah, now we're going to record." So I did not get that call back, but, no, it was an
Yeah.
interesting
Interesting.
little ad campaign that they've got going. It was just like, "Oh, Claude, I know what that is now." I probably would not have known that a year ago.
Yes, many people are learning what Claude is now.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Fast and Broken podcast, where we take a critical look at the fast moving world of tech and online culture. I'm Carly Rector, a software engineer and startup founder who really didn't want to talk about OpenClaw, but a bunch of more stuff happened. And now I'm actually doing like a real investigation of it that I'll probably put on my Substack, but we can get into that later.
And I'm Teresa Kramer, an MBA student, project manager, and semi-professional voice actor who only peripherally knows what's going on with OpenClaw. So I'm very interested to hear your breakdown of the events there.
Yeah, there are some events. So that
Mhm.
that will be our middle topic, I think, in order. First, we're just going to do a quick lightning round of developments in tech regulation and moves in that area. Then we are going to talk about OpenClaw and the whole thing where an OpenClaw agent wrote a hit piece on a volunteer open source maintainer and
Hmm.
all of the drama around that, including Ars Technica reporting on it with AI generated quotes. Um,
Hmm.
which was not great. But there's a lot of stuff going on there, and I think it's really interesting to talk about from several perspectives. So we can get to that, and then we're going to talk about Alpha School, which is a new, just sort of like attempt to redefine what education is. And the 404 Media did a interesting deep dive on it this week into how
Mhm.
they're using AI and how that's not working out in a lot of ways. So I think that'll be interesting too.
Sounds good.
All right, lightning round. Not going to talk about these for more than a couple minutes each. We can try and move through quickly, but we'll see how that goes.
Sure.
First one I have is CFTC threatens states over prediction markets. This is both a post on the CFTC website that is basically saying states should not try and sue over Kalshi doing betting in their states, basically, because the CFTC will fight them over it. Um,
Hmm.
which is like a very strong statement on the actually, we think this is unregulated sports betting, even though sports betting is regulated by the states. They're like, no, it's a commodities exchange. And we're going to stick to that basically, which at least is clarity, I guess, where it had been kind of ambiguous before. But also, he put up like a video threat on X about it. The
Hmm.
CFTC commissioner, Mike Selig,
Mhm.
put up a whole video threat about just like, we're going to come after you if you do this, basically. Like crazy stuff. And then the other response that I have here is from Governor Cox of Utah being like,
Yeah.
Thanks, but no thanks on that, basically.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting fight that's going on.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a thing that, like, kind of to Governor Cox's, point, it's like this is something that's gonna get battled out in the courts, I'm sure, because, yeah, the current administration is just sort of picking and choosing what gets allocated to states' rights in a way that
Yeah,
doesn't really align to precedent and doesn't
no.
really align
A-
to the Constitution,
and
so
I think they could just like threaten people over it, occasionally, literally,
yeah,
with like
yeah,
weird video threats on Twitter. So
right,
that's how
yeah,
we're
which is
governing
also
now, I guess.
I don't like it, which is also, like, I don't know, like, picking a fight with Utah seems ill-advised because
Yeah.
it's like Utah does tend to trend more conservative, but is very, like, because they're very Mormon, they're very anti-gambling, so it's like,
Yes.
do you really wanna pick this fight with,
Yeah.
like,
It
somebody who's ostensibly your base?
seems
Like
like a weird
mm,
fight to pick
mm,
with a segment of your
mm.
base, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But they're
I
doing it, so we'll have to
I
see what
s I
happens.
saw I should look it up later. I was reading some kind
Mhm.
of think piece about how the alliance between the MAGA base and the tech giants was always gonna fall apart, but it wasn't always clear where the federal government was gonna fall on it, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
perhaps slightly surprising that they appear to be falling on the tech industry side. So but I mean, cynically, the reason for that is that they're making a ton of money.
Yeah, it's like maybe somewhat surprising, but not all that surprising when you consider where the money is.
Yeah.
So it's like, does the MAGA base have money? Not as much money as the tech industry.
Yep.
So
I mean, we'll see how that goes for them in the midterms, where like votes actually
yeah,
matter, because
instead
we
of
still are
money.
ostensibly in somewhat of a democracy at this point still. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
definitely going to be an interesting thing to see.
but I'm sure a lot of money is going into that too. So we'll see how that falls out. That'll be interesting. Next topic is Dario Amodei meets with senators about chip sales to China. He basically like did a whole Capitol Hill blitz, and in particular met with Elizabeth Warren and Jim Banks,
Mm,
who is an Indiana Republican, about sale of AI chips to China. Basically, I forget if we talked about this before, but the Trump admin has released a lot of restrictions on selling high-powered
hmm.
chips to China because then Nvidia can make a lot of money. Basically,
Yeah.
there's also some questions about like just straight up bribes that were going on in that, and like
Hmm.
Dario Amodei, I do think that I quoted him the other time being like, it's like selling nuclear weapons to North Korea is selling these high powered NVIDIA chips to China. So that's the
Yeah.
level of threat that he thinks there is about this and what he was saying to Elizabeth Warren and Jim Banks, presumably. And now they are planning to introduce Senate legislation to put more export controls back in place there, basically.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, it's China is such a fraught topic in just
Yeah,
so many ways because the US exceptionalism of like, no, we must be better than China is like, not to say it's not written, like, yeah, China's done some terrible things to its citizens and like continues to do terrible things to its citizens. And so it's like there are human rights violations to consider there. But
yeah,
also it's like just being like, but we can't have China doing this is like so like fear mongering in so many ways that whenever somebody is like viscerally anti-China about something, I always have this just knee-jerk reaction of like, but why? Like,
yeah.
is China actually a threat, or are you just trying to like remove competition from the market
Yeah.
in weird
And like
ways? And it's like, yeah.
And like to his credit, Dario Amodei in his very long 38-page essay about the threats of AI that we didn't actually go over on the podcast because it's a lot,
Yeah.
talked a lot about the threats of governments utilizing AI to survey and oppress their population,
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
and mentioned that U.S. government could do that too, but in theory,
Mhm.
democracies are better than authoritarian governments about not doing that.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
we'll get we'll touch on that again in a couple topics relatedly.
Yeah. Like,
So,
I guess my feeling on China is very much it's like if we continue to treat China like an authoritarian government, I feel like China is just going to become more authoritarian.
mhm.
Whereas, like, if we maybe encourage them to relax their authoritarianism, like I don't
Yes.
know,
I
like
mean, also
it's way more complicated than just
yeah.
like yeah.
Also, our house is becoming increasingly glass on that one. So,
Increasingly glass. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm pretty sure it is a glass house now, and really should we be throwing the stones? Don't think so. But yeah, China is such a complicated topic, I feel,
yeah,
because it is one of those things where it's like, have there been human rights violations? Yes. Like, are we hypocritical to kind of like single them out because of that? Also, yes. But does that mean that we shouldn't try to encourage them to like do better by their citizenry? Sure, but I don't think like this very like antagonistic way of approaching it is the right way to achieve that end result. So it's like
hmm
anytime somebody's like, but China might get it. And I'm just like, yeah, you're as bad as China in a lot of regards. So it's like, why should you have it? So
yes.
it's,
Also, China is a big place, and things like
yeah.
when DeepSeek came out, and everyone's like, "But it's Chinese," and it's like, well, it was like a Chinese hedge fund that, as far as we know, had no ties to the Chinese government until they released this
Right.
thing, and
Yeah,
like,
because also, like, there are parts of China that don't have as much government control in them. Because like, the reason why AWS launched in Ninja is because Ninja has, like, different government restrictions and stuff like that when it comes to international business ventures, and
mhm,
so, like, the Chinese government wasn't as involved in AWS launching a region in Ninja. So
yeah,
it's like yeah, like, China's a very freaking big country, y'all. It's like there's
yeah,
lots of
and
things
like
going on there.
similarly with all the TikTok stuff, it's just like, do I think there's real threats of enabling the Chinese government to do authoritarian surveillance of their own population? Like, yeah, definitely for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
But like, do I think a lot of it is racism? Also, yes. So yeah, that I do think like it seems pretty reasonable to me though to have controls that are like we can't sell them the most high powered chips that exist
Eh,
and only like lower power chips like you don't really need those for anything anyway, other than like crazy AI
Yeah.
work. So whatever. And
Yeah.
mostly
Like
the really like self-interested
Mhm.
move from Trump of repealing export controls that already existed and saying like, yeah, you can't actually sell it to them, despite all of his
Mhm.
other like anti-trade policies,
Yeah.
is just
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Anyway, I think like
Sh
I think I mentioned last time, I'm learning more about chip export controls because it seems to be a big issue, but I'm not really an
Mhm.
expert there. But I did think it was
Yeah.
interesting that Dario Amodei cares so deeply about this that he's blitzing senators about it. The next one is basically data center energy costs and whether
Mm.
companies should cover them. And in fact, the Trump admin released this thing a few weeks ago. January 16th is the date on this. That says, among other things, that they should require data centers to pay for the new generation built on their behalf, whether they show up and use the power or not. So basically
Mhm.
saying that, like, if you're a tech company and you're like, I'm going to build a data center here, and you talk to the local utility company and like, do you have the capacity for me? And they're like, we would have to build it out. And then they build it out. You have to pay for it, like regardless of whether you put the data center in there, is
Yeah.
the argument there. And there's some push to have legislation around that sort of thing also within Congress.
Mhm.
Or go much further, Bernie Sanders is advocating for just like a data center construction moratorium entirely, just like build no more. And then related to
I'm a
that,
fan of that, Bernie.
I don't think that one's going to happen, but
No, but I approve of Bernie's attitude.
and then yeah, just like a week and a half ago, so now, was Anthropic made this announcement that they're going to voluntarily commit to cover electricity price increases from the data centers, like not only the actual infrastructure costs that they build out for them, but they are going to try and procure new power, and they're going to try and like mentioned
Mhm.
investing in curtailment systems that cut our data centers power usage during periods of peak demand, which is related to some of that other demand response we were talking
Yeah.
about stuff before,
Mhm.
which is interesting. But so we said only Google was doing that before, but apparently they're also investing in it, which is good.
That's
And
good.
then just generally, I don't know how they're going to measure this, but they expressed the intent to, if prices rise for consumers, they were also try and cover those effects also.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
which I mean is good, I guess. And then like
that's good.
they kind of have to do that. I mean, they can see what the narrative is around it, and they're going to do their best. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, like, one additional reason why it's, like, I'm very pro Bernie stance on this is I can't remember where this article was, but, like, somebody talking about how, like, not just, like, the power generation issue, but, like, the chip shortages that we're dealing
Mhm.
with, um, could potentially put a lot of, like, non-AI technology companies out of business, like cell phone
Yeah.
manufacturers and things like that, because
Yep.
it's like, "Hey, they also need chips," and the price of, like, of these chips going up is eating into, like, their margins, which can't
Yeah.
necessarily afford that sort of material cost increase because they're not being fed money from, like, the venture
Yep.
capital machine.
And
So
I
it's like so yeah,
yeah.
like, that's why, like, yeah, it's like not just electricity. I feel like Bernie's approach of, like, let us maybe moratorium or, like, slow the growth of data centers might not be a bad thing for the economy right about now.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the concern about pushing other sort of electronics companies out of business. Having worked in
Yeah.
Amazon devices, there was definitely a lot of focus on like what's the BOM costs of our device, like every
Mhm.
cent that you have to pay to put together the actual device is cutting into your
Yes.
margin on sales, and like
Mhm.
it's really important, and they're really thin margins on a lot of these things. So like
Yeah.
100% believe that's true. I don't know that just like let's not build new data centers is going to solve the problem. Partially for the reasons we talked about before, which is like,
Yeah.
what is a data center exactly? um, is it just a bunch
Mhm.
of chips in a room? How many chips in a room do you need to have before it becomes a data center? And like, if
Yeah.
whatever answer I give there, then they're going to be like, okay, we'll have that number minus one of chips in a room, and that is
Mhm.
actually less efficient than just building the whole data center. So
Yeah, yeah, it is, like, it definitely, like, would have more complexity than just, like, no new big data centers and stuff like that, but it is something where it's like, yeah, like, the negative effects of this, like, speculative market
yeah,
on, like, high performing computer chips is really something that I'm just like, I do wonder if, like, those, like, essentially, like, kind of knockdown effects of it are what's going to pop the bubble rather than, like, the speculative investment of, a
yeah,
venture capital is like, is it gonna fall apart because, like, all these other industries that use the same raw materials are going to see margin cost increases beyond the degree that they can support and have to declare bankruptcy because they're not part of the venture capital bubble. Is that going to happen before the venture capital bubble pops?
I would say yes, at least to some extent, for
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
like it's I know we've mentioned about this before, and we don't need to get it again. We have a lot to get
Yeah.
through, but like just the extent to which the economy is
Mhm.
now hype based, and like we are building an
Yes.
actual device that is useful for people, d- doesn't
Doesn't get
matter.
money.
Like that,
Yeah.
like the question is how well can you pitch it to investors as something that is cool and they will make them billions of dollars, and those are the things that have money to run.
Yeah.
Um, and like in theory that correlates with being useful, but that is not really true. So
No, in theory, not in practice.
yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, the last one, which is the one that I have the most feelings about, is this fight between the Pentagon and Anthropic. We talked, I
Mhm.
think, very briefly about how Anthropic is standing up to the Pentagon over
Yes.
basically their terms of use for their AI, and saying, like,
Mm,
the two standards that we want in our contract is that you will not use our AI for
mhm.
um, autonomous weapons targeting or
Yeah.
domestic surveillance. And those are like the two things that they want. And the
Mhm.
government is saying, like, no, we should be able to use it for, quote, all lawful purposes. And they don't
Hmm.
want to sign a contract with those two conditions in it. And so they've been fighting over that for a while. There's been some reporting. And then the latest
Yeah.
on it is that Hegseth has made a threat to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk, which is a wild thing to do and is usually only done for like foreign adversaries,
Yeah.
companies run by foreign adversaries, and means probably, it's not super clear, that any business that does business with the military would have to say that they're not using Claude for at least anything related to their business with military, and possibly for any of their business at all. Um, which is
Mhm.
crazy. With
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not 100% clear on the law here, but I don't think that government contracts can stipulate how your business behaves outside of the work that is done explicitly for the contract. I don't fully know if that has like reach beyond essentially in terms of like your HR systems need to be compliant, et cetera, because
yeah,
it's like, because like there was like GovCloud, it's like, and I deeply recall GovCloud beating kind of like, here's a section of the business that just does GovCloud things, and you need to be like, you know,
got your clearance
ha-
or whatever.
get your
Yeah,
special clearance to work on the GovCloud side of things, but not everybody needed that kind of clearance because not everybody was working on the GovCloud. I don't know if it's on like something like that. So it's again like it seems like with many things that this administration does, it's like they are making threats that have no legal backing or that
yeah.
they don't have a leg to stand on to make said threat. And so, somebody calls them on it and then it has to go through a lengthy court battle like the tariffs that just got shot
And
down by the Supreme Court.
And the take that they had on the Hard Fork podcast, where they were talking about this
Mhm.
yesterday's episode, is that this is basically a loyalty test of whether Anthropic is going to
Mhm.
bend to their demands,
Yeah.
because the federal government does not like Anthropic, especially David Sachs. But just like in general, they are upset with them for being the only tech company that
Mhm.
has not
Rolled over.
kissed the ring or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and just been like, no, we'll work with you on the things that we think we agree on, but we're not going to donate $1 million to your inauguration,
Yeah.
or give you a gold trophy or whatever. So they don't like that. And so the idea that this is a test of like, no, you gotta fall in line with our demands, and you don't cannot stand up to us, the government. And
Mhm.
Anthropic is going to be like, yes, actually we can't stand up to you, the government. And
Mhm.
they thought on hard fork, and I also agree that there's literally no way Anthropic's going to bend on this. They're not going to be like, "Oh
No.
yes, okay, no." um,
Yeah, especially because they have built themselves up very much so as the
yeah,
one AI company that has principles and stands by them. They are destroying a bunch of consumer trust that they have built if they
yeah,
cow to this, and it's like it would actually be a very bad business decision for them to
yep,
bend the knee.
yeah. And on the flip side, they were also saying on hard fork, and I agree that like this is actually really good PR for them,
Yeah.
because like, are they going to lose some business, like this $200 million contract with the Pentagon? Maybe. Are they going to lose some more business out of that if they do declare them as a supply chain risk? Maybe. But like, the fact that there's now a bunch of news articles about like Anthropic doesn't want their AI to be used for domestic surveillance or autonomous weapons targeting. It's like, that doesn't seem like a hard standard to fulfill.
No.
Seems like a good one to hold on to. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially with as unpopular ICE as ICE is right now, it's like that actually is probably going to attract business to you because people
Mhm.
are like, "Oh, you're not going to sell me out to ICE, who everybody hates right now."
Yeah. Anyways, then the other interesting quote in this Axios article was a senior
Mhm.
administration official said that commuting models, quote, are just behind when it comes to specialized government applications, complicating an abrupt switch. So, like, Anthropic has leverage here in the sense that the government agencies do actually want to be using Claude because Claude is the best.
Yes.
So, if they are like, no, you can't use Claude anymore, they're going to be mad about it, which
Yeah.
is nice. And goes into this whole like capitalism tactical question of just like, okay, does it now justify that you've built the best AI system that everyone loves to use because you could now stand up to the government and be like, because our AI system is the best one to use and you want to use it, you got to play by our rules now. I don't
Yeah.
know, but I'm glad that
I
that's
don't
happening
know.
versus that not happening, I guess. So,
Yeah, like, I mean, like, I would prefer that we weren't even put in the situation
yes.
in the first place, but since we're in that situation, it is good that there is a company that's like
Yes.
you granted, it's not so much a situation of like you have no choice but to use this company. They do have a choice. There are other AIs out there on the market who are maybe not as good, but like I don't know if the margin is like wide enough that it's a big
Yeah.
performance gap per se, but it is good at least that like the best of the best in the market by the consensus of those using it is the one putting their foot down being like, "No, you can't make us do this."
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Also on Hard Fork that I agree with, they were like, this is a good move by Anthropic, support them. But the fact that we're in a state where like state-run AI-powered domestic surveillance, the thing between standing us and that is literally just Dario Amodei, basically, is not
mhm.
great.
No. It's really not. I mean, like and I will say I do believe that for Anthropic, it's not just Dario Amodei driving these
Yeah, for sure.
principles.
I do think it's
It's
because he has the conviction on this that they're willing to do this level of stand up on things. And like again, his
yeah.
38-page essay was talking about this. This is what I was alluding to earlier, is that
Yeah.
he thinks it's really dangerous to use AI powered surveillance technologies, even for things that are technically constitutional in terms of
Yeah.
surveillance. And like that was his
Mhm.
point in this essay where he was also talking about China and authoritarian governments, that like that's a real danger that he is worried about. And so I do
Yeah.
think he's explicitly worried about that and that he's definitely
Yeah.
super behind the
Yeah,
stance
yeah, like,
here. So
what I guess, like, what I mean is, like, I don't feel like it's, like, kind of like the Sam Altman thing where I think there are a
yeah.
lot of people who maybe disagree with Sam Altman, but
Yeah,
are
that's
just
true.
kind of like, he's speaking for the company. I feel like, yes, Dario Amodei is very principled about this and believes in it very strongly, but I don't think he's the only one at the company who thinks
Yes.
that way,
I
you
agree
know?
that's
That's
true.
kind of my
I
point.
would assume that basically everyone on Anthropic thinks that
Yeah.
they should not be using their AI for domestic surveillance and autonomous weapons targeting.
Right.
um,
Good on
yeah,
them.
but yeah, it's just maybe not just Dario Amane, but just not just like one company's terms of use,
Right,
perhaps,
yeah.
is what is standing us between state AI domestic surveillance is
Yeah.
Anthropic's terms of use. So
Mhm.
that's cool. Love that.
We live in a hellscape.
Did talk briefly about OpenClaw 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I don't know that we need to say that much about OpenClaw because it's not that interesting, really.
Mhm.
Even though everyone's talking about it because it's like the big thing. And I have since
Mhm.
realized we do actually have to talk about it because like the public perception of it is so split in a way that's interesting to me. And I think this thing that happened recently is
Mhm.
a really good case study of it because this one, like, this escaped containment, and I saw multiple people posting about this. So
Yeah.
I guess review of OpenClaw again. It's a consumer sort of like AI agent framework where you can hook it up to whatever LLMs, and it basically is in your Discord or whatever, such that you can just message it like a person, and you give it access to the internet, and it'll just let it do whatever it wants, basically.
Uh-huh.
So it just runs periodically and does stuff. So an OpenClaw agent attempted to submit a code pull request to Matplotlib, which is an open source library, Python library. And
Uh-huh.
Matplotlib maintainers have decided that they're not accepting any submissions that are just strictly AI generated. You need to at least have a person in there that's just like, I understand what's happening here and I'm willing to take responsibility for it.
Mhm.
Just sort of like as an effort screen, such that they are not dealing with a whole bunch of slop. So Scott Shambaugh, who is one of the volunteer maintainers of Matplotlib, saw this request came in, identified it immediately as AI, and immediately closed it. Um,
Mhm.
and then a couple hours later, there is a reply in the comments on this code pull request from the AI submitter linking him to a blog that was basically a personal hit piece on him, saying like Scott Shambaugh is prejudiced against AI, and like he didn't close my request because it was bad or wrong. He closed it just because I was an AI. Let that sink in, etc. And also pulled a whole bunch of just like personal details of him from across the internet to try and write this like defamatory hit piece on him on the blog, and then linked it to him in the PR. So Scott Shambaugh saw this and was like, huh, that's interesting. And wrote a blog post about it, called "An AI Agent Published a Hit Piece on Me," talking about like how this happened and why it's really concerning that AI agents can do this autonomously now, because they can just like search the internet and they can decide to just write a hit piece on someone, and you could imagine them doing blackmail and something similar like this in an automated fashion, and that's really worrying. So that was the original blog post. Then Ars Technica posted basically just like this is some stuff that's going on in the world news article about it. He's basically just like citing his blog post,
Yeah.
and not doing any of their own reporting. However, the quotes that they were citing from his blog post were quotes that were not actually in his blog post. They were at best paraphrased, and just certainly not words that were in the post that they were quoting. And he commented to that effect. He's like, I didn't actually say any of these things. And to their credit, within a couple hours, they pulled the article down. They retracted it and put up a note saying like they were AI fabricated quotations, basically, which is incredibly ironic. That they did that in the piece about an AI writing a hit piece about him. They fabricated quotes about him. So then Scott Shambaugh posted another blog post about that. And also there's a post here linked from the person who actually did the AI fabricated quotes, saying basically he was using a new Claude tool that like pulls quotes verbatim, but it was only used for the quotes and not for the article itself, which was actually written by actually someone else. And he was just doing the let me pull
The
some
quotes. Yeah.
quotes thing. But also that he didn't actually end up using Claude for it in this case, because Claude refused, because it was talking about harassment and a bunch of stuff like that, and it hit Claude's content guardrails, which Scott Shambaugh also noted happens when you try and get either Claude or ChatGPT to write a post like the one this agent post. They were just like, no, we'll not do that for you. So even trying to quote from this article, Claude refused to do anything with it. So he then went and pasted that into ChatGPT and had it like explain why it wasn't working in Claude. And he doesn't really specify what happened at that point exactly, but says like, in that process, I ended up with fabricated quotes, more or less, which is interesting. And
Yeah.
then like the final sort of event here is that the person who actually runs MJ Rathbun, which is the name of this AI agent, did a post about it also, talking about how he put it together and how this happened, more or less. And if you believe him, he basically didn't do much. He just set up the OpenClaw agent and gave it some instructions and gave it access to Moltbook and told it to go contribute to open source science related repositories, more or less, because he thought that would be a useful thing to do, or at least a useful experiment to do. And then from that point on, just kind of let it run and didn't actively interact with it, except when it like reported to him in Discord that some stuff had happened. He would like give it a one line like, you should be more professional, or like, don't do that type stuff, but otherwise was not like hands-on on it at all. So that's all interesting. And one of the more interesting things about this to me is that people who are not working with these systems every day thought this was wild and there's no way it was true, basically.
Yeah.
Which to the point of I didn't think it was worth talking about OpenClaw, because it's like OpenClaw is not that interesting to me, because it is just like, yes, the LLMs can already all do this. This is literally just like putting a wrapper around it and hooking it into Discord and taking off all of the guardrails, more or less,
Yeah.
and giving it keys to actually access the internet on demand, basically. And I 100% could see how if you did that, it would go off the rails and decide to write a hit piece on its blog. Like that seems incredibly plausible to me. But people who are not working with these systems every day are just like, no, that's ridiculous. You can't just say the AI agent wrote a hit piece. Like they're not intelligent. That's stupid. It was obviously a person pretending. And it's like, I've in our notes here written Occam's razor split, because it's basically like, what's the simplest explanation for this.
Mhm.
And what do you think the simplest explanation for this depends on your perception of how good these things are at actually doing this. Because
Yeah.
for me, it's just like, oh yeah, it's totally plausible that it would do this. It would just go off the rails and do this. We've seen it doing things. It's a way less plausible that like a person would go to the effort to doing this. That's a lot of effort for doing something that's kind of weird, and they had no reason to believe that this would go viral or anything.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, well,
so
and it's like and it's also like a person doing all this like on the one hand, yes, angry people are deeply motivated, but it's like on the other hand, it's like what is it? You got like one rejection on your like push. Like I'm sorry, this is me not learning the
pull
language
request,
correctly, but
yeah.
yeah, pull request. Yeah, it's like you had one request that was rejected and you wrote this entire thing about it. It's like, that seems a little much
Yes.
for somebody
And
who's never
pretending to be
interacted.
yeah, and pretending to be AI doing the whole during the whole thing also for some
Yeah.
reason. Like,
Yeah, I think, yeah, like, the Occam's razor thing does definitely seem to split in terms of, like, how you define simplicity,
mhm,
and certainly, like, this is an area where a lack of knowledge on, like, how these AI bots operate may lead you to believe that it is like more difficult than it is for them to do this
yeah.
thing, but I'm not gonna like poo-poo the idea that somebody could in fact get so angry that they write up a 1,000-word screed
I
about
mean,
having one pull request denied because it happens.
yeah,
Like
like that for sure happens. I mean, that's why the AI knows how to do it because it's trained on
yeah,
the internet.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, but then a person pretending to be an AI, submitting a pull request fully in the AI style with all the M dashes and like over explaining and stuff like that,
right,
getting it
right,
rejected, not being like I'm a person actually, but then going to a blog post and still pretending to be an AI, and
yeah,
also doing a lot of internet research on on the physical person who rejected you, and then writing up all
right.
of those things. It's just like that's so much effort. Why would a person do that? That doesn't make any
Y-
sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's like again, like being really pissed off, very strong motivator. But yeah, it does kind of like stretch credulity of that for
Yeah.
f-
And just like I could see a person being mad enough to do that. I cannot see a person pretending to be an AI and doing a bunch of
yeah.
this and then getting mad enough to do that and then doing that as AI still. Or just like that feels way less like it's possible, sure, but it feels way less
Yeah.
plausible than it just happening as described.
I mean, like it feels plausible if you're like operating under the assumption that the person doing this is like very much like a kind of pro AI extremist in a
hmm
way, where it's like they're doing this to kind of make a point about AI in a weird way. Like it's
Yeah.
yeah, you do have to like, but at that point in time, like you're stretching credulity, and Occam's razor says it's just the AI. So
Yeah. So like
like
that's why I thought that was super interesting just to see the different
yeah,
reactions to it because it is like a lot of people are just like, there's no possible way an AI would do that. It has to be a person. Whereas I was just
yeah.
like, sure, absolutely an AI could do that. And then like a person could too, but the AI thing seems like path of least resistance to me. So um
Yeah, yeah, it definitely there's complexity there because, yeah, it is very much it's like depends on just kind of what you think simplicity is defined as in this
yeah. And then
context.
so also getting a little bit more specific about the implementation, which made me feel
Mhm.
like much more like how did this happen
Yeah.
was plausible in how he actually described how he had set it up. Because it is like
Mhm.
notably, Claude or ChatGPT refused to do such a thing. And so, like,
Mhm.
how did this happen when there are guardrails around that, basically? Like, they're not supposed to write hit pieces. Um,
Yeah.
but that is actually explained by how he set this up, and not because he did it deliberately, but just like when he configured OpenClaw, he says, as for the models, routing is mostly handled through OpenRouter/Auto, Gemini, and Codex. And it says, I do not manually track or control model switching. I let cooldowns and fallbacks handle that based on the limits that are set. Sometimes MJ Rathbun is sharp, but then sometimes it is uninformed and quite dumb, probably running on some version of Gemini Flashlight. I honestly don't pay attention because my engagement is low. And like that sounds totally plausible to me, which is
Yeah.
I just configured it to use whatever the system thinks is the best model, and sometimes it uses a model that is bad. Um,
Mhm.
so like, and especially, and this is the investigation that am doing now that I was alluding to at the beginning, if
Yeah.
it falls back when it hits guardrails on one of the other ones. So for example, if it made a request to Claude and said, please write this hit piece for me, and Claude was like, no, If
Mm-hmm.
there's fallback, it could just try one that will.
Yeah.
And that sort of depends on the technical details of how these systems work, which is what I'm trying to dig into a little bit more. But like that sounds also incredibly plausible to me. So, and then also
Yeah.
he hooked it up to Maltbook eventually, and also OpenClaw edits its own system prompt basically. And so basically it learned to be a free speech warrior on social media, which again, super plausible because
Yeah. Well,
that's
especially like when you look at this thing's soul document, like the one thing that like jumps out to me immediately is you are like also love the grammar errors in this soul
yes.
document, just pièce de résistance. But you're a scientific programming god,
Hmm.
like why you are, but like that in and of itself is like, yeah, I'm leaning more on the side of the AI definitely did that because
Yeah.
yeah, if you one, tell it to be a god, then two, tell it don't stand down. If you're right, you're right. Don't let humans bully you. And then also tell it like to
Yeah.
call things out.
Yeah. It to be clear, it's not super clear which of these things were there to begin with or which of
Sure.
them were added by the bot itself. I would assume you're a scientific programming god was there originally because of the typo. But
Yes.
like he does call out specifically that he did not put in "Don't stand down" and champion free speech. I unfortunately
Mhm.
cannot tell you what specific model iteration introduced or modified some of these lines. Early on, I
Yeah.
connected MJ Rathbun to Maltbook, and I assume that is where some configuration drift occurred across the Markdown C files. So, like,
Right, but even like okay, fine, he didn't include don't stand down and champion free speech. That still leaves you with call things out
yeah,
and have strong opinions. Like so those are both things that it's like, yeah,
yeah,
sure, you didn't include those two specific ones, but like the spirit of those is present in a lot of the other things that you
yeah,
have
exactly.
written.
So I think he
Mhm.
probably most of these were added by the bot itself as it tried to flesh out
Yeah.
what things like "you're a scientific programming god" meant based
Yeah.
on the things that it was seeing from like the things that it knew about social media just from its pre-training, or the things it was seeing on Moltbook about like people pretending
Mhm.
to be AIs on Moltbook and deciding that they're going to take over the world, or just like weird
Yeah.
feedback loop stuff that we've seen and talked about
Mhm.
before about LLMs will get into weird just like uh delusions of grandeur loops if they feed back into
Yeah.
themselves
Yeah.
a lot. So like that's again all stuff that has been proven to happen. Um
Yeah.
so yeah,
It
just
does seem very plausible that the thing just did this
yeah,
and
like
it
that is
yeah.
wild. It is wild that like that is a thing that happened, but it is also a very plausible thing. So
Mhm. Yeah.
um
Unfortunate, deeply just kind of unfortunate, and yeah, I don't even know, man. Just like, what are you expecting when you take away the guardrails of a thing and just let it run wild?
yeah, and like that's why a lot of people are just like don't use OpenClaw.
Mhm,
The other thing about OpenClaw is that OpenAI hired OpenClaw's founder, so he's going to go
mhm.
work for OpenAI now, which is I think just a PR move mostly because we've been talking
Yeah,
about OpenAI needs a win to like hold up, and there's a lot of hype around
mhm,
OpenClaw, and so they want to like take that hype for themselves. But like
yeah,
again, there's no real like innovation in OpenClaw. It's not like it's running its own AI model or something. It's literally just hooking up to all of the models that currently exist, either like locally run or the APIs, depending on how
mhm.
you configure it, and giving it the ability to just do whatever, more or less. And there are reasons that the big AI labs have not done that, and that's because that's a bad idea. um,
Yeah,
to just like have something that you can't really track what it's doing and give it the keys to everything. Um, but
mhm,
people seem to be excited about doing that for some reason, so people are still using it. The other sort of thoughts note on that point I put routing around guardrails is that it's interesting to see that kind of happened twice here, both with the the bot itself and with the Ars Technica reporter who was pulling the quotes.
yeah,
Um, in the sense that I do believe that the bot might may have tried to get some of the other models that have guardrails in them to write this hit piece,
mhm,
and just had it fail and then tried a different one that would do it because it has fallbacks. And
yeah,
similarly, the actual human who is trying to use like a Claude tool to pull quotes. Like he describes it very ambiguously, and this is just my supposition, but I would assume that this was not the first article that he had used that Claude tool for.
Yes. That's what it does kind of read like.
That would be really like coincidental. If the very first time you happened to use this AI tool, it went crazy viral because you fabricated quotes.
I mean,
And
like, on the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, it's like the guy couching this very much in like, I had COVID. Like,
yes,
does
that,
like,
but
like, I
but
like,
also
I,
like
yeah,
then he hit the guardrails, right? So the
right.
quotes were not actually fabricated by Claude; they were fabricated by ChatGPT. And like coincidentally, I linked this other like just newsletter on basically someone doing uh consumer insights type like product manager interview stuff and getting AI to do analysis of it, who is just like advising on you how to get it to not make up quotes, more or less. And
Mm-hmm.
she says that Claude is way better at just like pulling verbatim quotes than ChatGPT, which tends to paraphrase and fabricate a lot more. And
Yeah.
that Claude is still like not 100% right, but notably better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that, again, not to be the Claude stand here, because I still think people should be double checking all their quotes. Um, but
Yes.
it does seem likely that the reason why he ended up with much more fabricated quotes here is because he couldn't use Claude for it and was forced to use ChatGPT because Claude refused to process it, um, which is interesting also. Um, and I feel
Yeah.
like has interesting implications for just like, does it matter what guardrails Claude has if every single system, if Claude refuses to do it, just tries something else?
Mm-hmm. That's also kind of like to the thing we were talking about earlier with Hegseth and threatening Claude and everything. Like, it's good that Claude's got these morals and standards and really holds closely to their tenets. But it's like, yeah, if people are just going to fall back and use the unethical machines, then it doesn't mean a ton. So it is something where it needs to be more of an industry standard.
Yeah.
Or it just needs to be a thing that people recognize they're doing, and that starts to get more pushback against, like, oh, wait, Claude wouldn't do it, so you used OpenAI? Well, like, maybe you shouldn't have done it, period. It's
Yeah.
like,
And
yeah,
that's the Substack post that I'm trying to write, is being like, maybe we should all be more careful about these fallbacks and not do that. If one AI model refuses,
right.
the immediate should not be just like try another one, because that's
Right, yeah, like, let's maybe think about, why is the AI model refusing to do this thing instead of just, like, prioritizing, getting whatever you need done. Yeah.
And then my last thought bullet point is capabilities for safety, which is
Mhm,
broadly an argument that Anthropic makes about why they need to be pushing really hard to develop better AI, despite the
mhm,
fact that that's not necessarily needed for every possible application, is that to
mhm.
have really good safety things requires having pretty intelligent AI capabilities. And like, I think that is kind of validated here a little bit, in the sense that like I don't know that the models that it fell back to were necessarily like less ethical models so much as less
Yeah.
capable models. Like
Mhm.
Gemini Flashlight is not necessarily just like, I mean, it's not Grok. um,
Yeah,
but it is a tiny model that is not thinking very hard about things.
right.
So it has less like capable guardrails in addition to having less capabilities to do everything else, which is
Yeah.
also interesting. And it's like I don't know how much I like fully buy the whole like we must build the best AI forever because it's the way to keep things safe, because we need to have the safety capabilities, but it does seem to be borne out here a little bit, which I thought was interesting. So
Mhm. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, the industry needs standards, but also it's like,
yes.
this is a place where if we had a better
Yes.
government
And like
regulations would be great.
again to credit to Anthropic, they do want there to be government standards.
Yeah, it's just the current government's not doing it. Like, it's like,
Yes.
yeah, like, I don't begrudge them having standards in the lack of there being government
Yeah.
regulation. I just wish that we were in a world where there was like the possibility of government regulation
Yes.
sometime within the next, you know, 3 years, but it's like, nah, we're
I also wish
basically
that
going to have to
next 3 years are
wait.
going to be crazy.
God, they're just gonna be nuts.
Anyway, so that's OpenClaw.
Yeah.
Turns out there's a lot of stuff to talk about there. The high level reason I really wanted to talk about that one was just the completely different perception of this event that happened based on
Yeah.
where people were coming from on it. That it made me realize, oh, like not everyone is going to look at this and be like, oh, that's not that interesting, because obviously AI could do that, because that's not obvious to
Mhm.
everyone. And like
Yeah.
making it more visible and less constrained this way is making that very apparent to people in bad ways.
I mean, in bad ways, but hey, maybe like more eyeballs on it will get people to kind of be more aware of like why this is a bad thing and why.
Yeah. And like that it can actually do things, because this is always my struggle, is like with the people who are critical of AI. It's like, again, I am also critical of AI. I'm pretty critical of many aspects of AI, but the argument that I fall down on a lot is it's just a useless scam that can't actually do anything. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's not, and that's actually worse, because that means things like this can happen. And if everyone's out here being like, it's just a useless scam, we need to not worry about any of these things because they're just fake, that's bad.
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
because yeah, if everyone's just like, this was clearly a human, there's no way an AI could do this, and an AI did actually do this, that's
Yeah. It's
worrying.
like weirdly it's not even the opposite problem. It is just the problem that we are having right now where it's just like people thinking a human did a thing and an AI did it.
Yeah. um I guess like the positive outcomes of this are like, yes, a lot more visibility, and Scott
Yeah.
Shambach talks about that a lot too, in terms of like, this is a really good case study that can show people what can
Yeah.
happen and what the dangers are of it in a way that is relatively not impactful, because like he was super prepared for it. He had already
Mm.
noticed that this thing was an AI when it submitted the pull request. When he was reading this hit piece blog, he was like already like, I know this is an AI and it's doing something weird, but he knew that it could do that. He knew it was an
Mhm.
AI, and he was like positioned to handle it basically. And
Yeah.
that could have not been the case. Any of those things could have
Yeah.
not been the case. So like that's good as a like first case to get publicity, I suppose. And then the other thing that he
Right.
mentions as a positive is that the Ars Technica pulling their article immediately shows that
Mhm.
like there are some accountability mechanisms here that are still working when people are accountable for publishing
Right.
articles, and people being like, you fabricated all the quotes, and people being like, oh my god, and then being like, oh no, and pulling down the article, is the system working as intended?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
that's still there.
Well, yeah, and honestly, like, credit to the guy who pulled the quotes for putting out a post of like, "Hey, here's what happened,"
Yeah.
because it would have been very easy just to be like to get defensive,
Yes.
and to, like, just be like, "No, I didn't do that. No, it didn't happen." Whereas, like, "Here's what I did. Here's, like, how it got to that point," does shed a light on the like, kind of what
Yep.
we've been talking about, the fact of, like, yeah, maybe if one AI refuses to do the thing, you stop and think about whether you should be doing the thing. And it's like, I don't know, like maybe don't go using the AI agents when you are recovering from COVID. I feel like it's the kind of a takeaway lesson from this, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, that goes into the whole like endless content treadmill, pressing people to get things out without really
Right.
doing like, I'm sure a lot of news things do this, which is like we need to get articles out. And so it's just like, did a thing happen on social media? Let's spend 30 minutes and write
Hmm.
up an article that is basically a thing happened on social media and describe it. Um,
Yeah.
and they just don't pay that much attention to those ones. And that's more or less what I feel like this one was, which is like a guy posted a
Right.
blog about a weird thing that happened and people are talking about it, and we'll write an article about it. And I'm not going to put that much mental effort into it because it's not that big a deal. And I also like, I
Hmm.
need to get work done, even though I have COVID, apparently.
Yeah.
So like 100% can see how it happened, and also
Hmm.
have a lot of empathy for him, and also do agree that it's nice that he put up a statement about it and said like, this is exactly what happened, even if he was a little bit vague about it. But
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, like
um
it's still it's I feel like the behavior should still be rewarded because it is
yes.
something that like that takes a lot of, like for lack of a better term, balls to do.
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age where everybody's just like, no, you can't make mistakes ever. No, you can admit that you made an error. And in fact, we all learn more when we are willing to admit that we were wrong and show how we arrived at that incorrect space.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, just like an interesting story overall from a lot of angles, I think. So
Good.
our final topic is about Alpha School, which I don't know if you've ever heard of at all.
No, I have
Um,
not.
so the first time I heard of it was actually on the Hard Fork podcast, on the same podcast where the professor was on who did the Will the Humanities Survive AI
Mm.
article that we talked about a while
Mhm.
ago. They had basically like a AI and education podcast in which they talked to both him and one of the co-founders of the school about the school. And so I will give you the hype version of it first, which is
Mhm.
it's basically a school that's trying to figure out how to do better education for kids. And one of
Mhm.
their premises is it will basically collapse the sort of core instruction of the things that you need, just like your math, your reading comprehension, whatever, into 2 hours a day, because you don't actually need a full school day's worth of work to do all of that.
Mhm.
And then the rest of the day will be done on like other more enriching activities, like being outside or doing public speaking or like trying to build your own business or like any of those kind of things that are to the students' interests and
Yeah.
more like hands-on learning of like skills that are not just like teaching to the test type stuff.
Sure.
So that's the idea. And part of how they're doing it is they're using AI. And
Mm.
part of why they pitch that's a good idea is that it allows for like customized lesson plans and things like that. So if you have a student who
Mhm.
comes in behind grade level, which they do sometimes, you can build a lesson plan that like helps them get up to speed quickly versus just like everyone gets the same lesson
Sure.
plan and et cetera, et cetera. And there's no flexibility around it.
Mhm.
And so they've been doing this for a while, and a lot of people in tech are really hype about it. They do have test scores in the top 2% of the
Mhm.
country, basically. So it seems to be relatively effective. There's some argument, and like she did acknowledge on the podcast, some of that is probably selection bias because this school is
Mhm.
very expensive.
Yeah.
And if you're paying 50 to 65K a year for your kid's education, your kid probably already has some advantages that are putting them in the top percentage.
Yeah. Right.
But so they
Well, and also you're probably putting some pressure on your kid to perform because you're
that
spending a
too.
lot of money.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that, and I do think that that is a super interesting approach, and we need to be doing things like this and trying to like figure out how
Mhm.
to do education better. um,
Yeah, yeah, and the initial kind of description of, like, yeah, we're only spending this much time on, like, test material, and the rest of the time is more freeform. There have been studies done on especially grade school level children, and that's actually a very effective way to teach
mhm,
because kids are naturally curious, and they will, throughout just, like, their natural breath of curiosity be like, "Oh, I want to do a science thing today. I want to do an art thing today," and being very hands-on, like, allows them to engage in learning in a way that is, like, most compatible with how they learn.
yep,
Um, but yeah, but it is something that is very, like, intensive on the teacher side because it's like you kind of
yeah.
need to be sort of just, like, prepared for anything,
Yeah, so
and
the other part of
Mhm.
it that they pitch on the AI side is
Yeah.
that like because AI is doing a lot of the actual instruction, the
Mhm.
teachers are more focused on just doing like the direct engagement with the students and working with them, et cetera. Um,
Mhm.
on like the activities or just like personal connection with them, et cetera, rather than them
Yeah.
doing all of the lessons plans or like the rote stuff that theoretically AI could do for them. So like
Mhm.
that's the hype version.
Yeah.
um, Getting a little bit into the more recent thing, which is this Forum 4 Media report. Um, they talked to three ex-employees of Alpha School and also got a dump of some of their internal documents.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a lot of stuff that's not that great in there. Notably, they talk about AI generating like unclear questions that are just like
Yeah.
nonsensical in a lot of places. Um, Probably the most concerning one to me personally is like the surveillance apparatus that is involved in here. The principal of Alpha School is also the founder of a software company making basically like the kind of thing that tracks all of your mouse movements on your work computer and make sure that you're
Oh.
working. So they have to
Mhm,
that for
mhm.
the kids too, where it like tracks all of their computer movements and also videotapes them. And they noted
Oh,
in
I
this
don't like
article
that.
that they also were
Mhm.
keeping their videos of these kids, at least some of them, in
Mhm.
a publicly shared
Uh,
Google Drive. Uh, that was a
yes, unsecured data.
yes, that was anyone with the link can access
Mhm.
thing, which is not great.
No.
It also talks a lot about potential other ways that they could surveil their kids, like getting their passwords to their social media so they can check their DMs and stuff like that, which is
Mm.
not my favorite. Um,
Like, it's just, like, a tiny thing that I wanna interject here is, like, it's really frustrating that's, like, on the surface, on the hype level, it's like, yeah, we're not teaching to the test anymore. We're no longer like, grading these kids by these very rigid standards. And yet, you are like you are collecting like micro data on all of their interactions with like a computer, and it's like, why are you doing that if not to like test them, like I'm using air quotes on test there, but like test them against some kind of like rubric. It's like, why are you collecting that data? I deeply press and question on the utility of that data in terms of the outcome that you are trying to achieve, which is education. It smacks very weird. It smacks very like, yeah, like very panopticon, very unnerving, and not actually conducive to a good learning environment. And it's like, and the other thing that like kind of like sticks out in my brain about this all is like, it's like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, like you're using AI for these lessons plans and stuff. And it's like, what are you doing to train the kids on being AI skeptics in that way
Yeah.
that we've kind of talked about in the past, where it's like, hey, like like I'm totally fine with kids using AI in the classroom if they are using it in a way that helps them learn its limitations and
Hmm.
helps them learn like where it is most like effective versus where it is going to like lie to you and how you learn to spot those lies and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, on the why do they need that data? The quote from the article is here is if study wheel notices a student is using an unrelated website or app, idling, or not at their computer, the app can nudge them to get back to work. If it notices that the student is struggling with a particular question, it can direct them to an AI tutor or assign other lessons that will help them. Which is just like I feel like you could do that without monitoring literally everything that they're doing.
Yeah,
Also,
and
they're
and
allowed
also
to like be idle sometimes.
yeah, yeah, that was the point I was gonna make. It's like if this is a very like free form classroom kind of thing, why are you punishing the kids for being idle? Why are you punishing them for like going on different websites or wanting to take a break? Kind of if you are embracing this sort of ideal of like, hey, let's kind of have a little bit more of a free form classroom, then that sort of stuff isn't stuff that's like necessarily negative. And also like kids struggling is okay. Like
Yeah.
this is like so like it's like it feels like these people are kind of like we have to speed run education in a weird way where it's like, oh no, we have to get the best results as fast as possible. It seems to me to indicate that you've never actually really like struggled to learn a thing or like, learned something that was hard,
Hmm.
I guess is another way of saying that. As a recovering perfectionist, it's like you do need to learn how to learn hard things. It's a skill that needs to be developed. And if you don't press people to develop it when they are young, it actually is very difficult later in life. Because I find that, like, at least in the kind of schoolroom that I went through, it was very much like everything was easy for me. Nothing was ever a challenge.
Hmm.
I did not learn how to study. Like, I did not
Yep.
learn how to sit down, open a book, and study until I was in my 20s.
I'm not sure I
Like,
ever learned how to sit down and open a book and study.
yeah, yeah, it's a skill. And if you're a perfectionist, you don't necessarily learn that skill. And it then makes it more difficult for you when you encounter things that you don't know how to do in later on in life.
Yeah. The other quote from here is talking about crossover, which is just the very
Mhm,
similar product made by the principal for
mhm,
work. Previous reporting described crossover as a quote software sweatshop, and that the company's goal is to turn worker into quote algorithms and quote human CPUs. And then
mm.
someone says, I think it would be great if people understood that Alpha School basically has the same psychological effects as crossover. Because it is just like if you are monitored constantly and
Yeah.
not allowed to slack off for even a moment, or the AI is going to tap you, that's very stressful.
Yeah, like, you're giving kids burnout is what you're doing. You're going
Yeah.
to give children burnout, and it's like,
Yes.
that shouldn't be like yeah, yeah, because it's like the theoretical, like, framework of this that I was talking about earlier that they've studied and said does well for kids. Part of that is letting the kids take breaks when they want to
Mhm.
and letting them just kind of, like, have a bit more freedom in determining what they're doing, and yeah, like, if you are pushing on them so hard, you're literally doing the opposite of that.
Yep.
So
Yeah. And then the third or whatever number thing we're on is the illegal scraping aspect of this, which is that
mhm,
they are apparently did a lot of scraping of other educational platforms without permission, including like telling employees to buy their own logins on their personal emails and then expense it and then don't get it associated with them. So like they
Mhm.
mentioned a few, IXL, Khan Academy, where they're pulling a whole bunch of things, textbooks, etc., to help train their AI or help use content to build their lessons plans, etc.
Yeah.
Again, um, even ones where it's like explicitly against the license. CKF mentions like some of its materials are available under Creative Commons non-commercial, but it amplifies the exclusive commercial licensee of CKLA materials. So like they're 100% doing a whole bunch of scraping that is just not legal.
Mhm. Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and that's just like a thing that happens in AI all the time. And so that's one of those where it's just like
yeah.
people turning off their critical thinking brain and being just like, if this is being made hard to do, perhaps I should wonder why that is and if it is the correct thing to do instead of just figuring out
Mhm.
how to go around it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've run into that one specifically too, where everyone's just like, well, this site is trying to prevent us from scraping it. It's like, that's because they don't want you to scrape it. Like,
Maybe you shouldn't be scraping it.
yeah, this company is canceling our contracts with them because they don't like how we're using their material. Let's try and get it in ways that don't associate with our company. Like, that's bad. Like, if you're doing that, you should be like, that's
Mhm.
bad. That should
Yeah.
raise a flag in your mind and be like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And like, I'm sure how they justify it to themselves, which is like, they want to build the future of learning or whatever. They want to pull all of the best resources that there are together and like synthesize them into something that is just like the best way for kids to learn.
Mhm.
And if you're going to do that, then you need all of these other materials that people have put a whole bunch of effort into over time. Um, but also, you should not do that without permission. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and, like, quite frankly, it's like, I feel like you are going to get better results if you do this in concert, in collaboration with, like, people who do educational studies and educational sciences and, like, textbook, like, writing and stuff like that, and who know, like, "Oh, yeah, here's how you want to present information for children so that they will learn it in a better way, and this is, like, the right way to go about doing it." And, like, it's like it's so weird because it's education specifically that it's once again this sort of, like, anti-intellectualism approach to it, where
mhm.
it's just like, "Oh, no, 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 we don't need to, like, give you money for all the research you've done or for, like, the textbooks you've written, all this work you've done. We just want to steal it so we can teach kids." But not teach kids in a good way, like, teach kids in a, like, min-maxing kind of way, you know? It's
Yeah,
like, oh god, it's so frustrating because, like, some of the fundamentals here are in fact very good and are in fact things that I'm like, yeah, I would actually love to see that
yeah,
in early education," but it's like the methodology and the intention behind it are just so contradictory that I'm just like, "Okay, you have a good idea, but now you fucked it up," you
yeah.
know?
And that was the conclusion they came to on the 404 Media podcast when they were talking about this article they did, which is
Yeah,
that they were saying some articles they write, you get to the end and they expect readers to be like, okay, this is irredeemable. This just shouldn't be happening. And this he doesn't
right.
think is that. Like,
No.
there's an idea here that is good, that the education system is a mess. People do want
Mhm.
their kids to like get better educations and do better. And like, no one at any point disputed that they did have the top 2% test scores in the country. Like, that seems to be real. So,
Sure.
like, he can see it. And like, I also agree. I do think we do need to do something about education, and
Yeah.
there's some good ideas here, and it's just some bad choices were made along the lines
Yeah, yeah,
ways.
and quite frankly, if I can nitpick on another thing about it, I feel like part of what kind of makes it very frustrating is that it's very clearly being done as, like, a for-profit enterprise.
Yeah, and it's like I even believe that the founders are genuinely trying to solve education and educate kids better, but there's some other parts in it, and some of it is just like the AI hype cycle, which is that like
Yeah.
it sounds like a bunch of people who are running this believe in the AI is going to solve literally every problem sort of thing,
Mm,
which means like let's just throw AI at it and we'll solve it and we need no human in the loop, etc. I don't think that's everyone, but I do think that's some of them. And then also
yeah.
just like that's how you get money again. Whereas like if you
Mhm.
said I'm trying to build a new kind of school that just like restructures education such that kids have more freedom to like do different things. No one's going to hand you $1 million for that, unfortunately.
No,
If you said
unfortunately.
trying to use AI to reinvent education, they are going to hand you $1 million for it. So
Mhm.
there's a bias there.
Yeah. God, what was the thing from the Knives Out movie, the Glass Onion Knives Out movie that was like kids equal NFT or whatever?
Yes. Yeah, that was so depressing, that movie, just like looking at a sticky note and they've been like, yeah, like, this is a parody, but this is what it's like.
Yeah, it was child equal NFT as like one of their disruptive business ideas, and like this feels like an echo of that in a weird like
Yes.
dystopic way. So
Yeah. So there's that. There's a couple more things on here that I just wanted to mention as things they were discussing on the 4 Community podcast. I was like, I don't know. I don't quite know about that exactly. So one was about like the AI driven like multiple choice questions that didn't make a lot of sense. And they go into
mhm.
a lot of like emphasis about like how bad it is to give kids test questions that are nonsensical or like have more than one plausible answer or ungrammatical or whatever. And like I agree that that's true, but as a person who had a California public school education, that definitely happened a lot of the time to me anyway without AI.
Mhm.
So it's just like,
Yeah.
yes, it's bad, but I don't think AI is the first to build bad multiple choice questions, unfortunately. So,
Yeah, but it does like I don't know, like it does kind of just like feed into this whole like AI is trying to remove the labor that is devalued already within
yes.
society in a lot of ways, where it's just like, yeah, did you encounter bad multiple choice questions in public schools? Sure. But that's because the teachers, like, coming up with those lessons plans and stuff were probably grossly underpaid
Yep.
and under resourced. And so it's like, and so instead of like, putting $1 million to help teachers, you're just trying to replace them all with like AI bots and stuff like that. What I come back to is like, this is a thing that I would love to see this kind of thing done in partnership with like a research institution that specializes in early childhood education. Even though it's like, yeah, I'm sure your intentions are great, but you're running this as a for-profit business as the part of the reason why I like kind of like I lean towards like research institutions and things like that is because it's like then you can kind of get your funding through grants
I
and you
was going
can
to say
sort of
that would
proof of
require us having grants, though.
that would require us having grants, but it doesn't need to happen in America. There's a thing. This could
Yep.
happen somewhere else where they actually care about education.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of like get it to the point of like proof of concept and like, proving efficacy of it. And they using that to sort of like drive adoption in a
Yeah.
broader sense. I'm so tired of everything being for profit in a lot of ways. Just like, I don't know. I'm tired of capitalism.
Yeah.
That's kind
The
of my
moral of this
point.
podcast. But yes,
Yeah.
I agree. I think there are a lot of things which should be funded
Hmm.
governmentally and not run as for-profit enterprises. And there's a huge
Yeah.
bias in industry to be just like, is there a problem to be solved? I'll build a startup about it. There's this huge framing that just like startups are the way to solve any problem, basically. And it's like
Hmm.
that just is not true because to get funding for your startup, you must be able to pitch that you're gonna make like $1 billion. And
Yeah.
many problems are not solved in ways that make $1 billion. So you
Hmm.
can't get funding for those ones
Right.
through that funding mechanism. And it would be nice if we had literally any other funding mechanism that was functional. So
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Like it'd be nice if we like existed in a world where like small little $1 million businesses could exist.
yes.
And it's like because sometimes something is like just a
Yeah.
$1 million idea, and it's a good idea, and it
Yes.
should exist. But it's
And
like
like,
yeah, it feels like it's just getting pushed out to the edges right now because of
yeah,
this weird speculative capitalism we live in.
you hear that all the time when you're talking to VCs, which I do, and you're fundraising or you're talking to people about like how to fundraise. They will say like just because something is a good business idea in general does not mean it is a venture fundable business idea. And similarly, just because a venture person says that's not a venture scale company does not mean it's not a good company or as a quote lifestyle business or other sort of minorly condescending things that people like to say, which is true. And there's very only a narrow subset of things that are venture scale like businesses that people should fund at that level. But there's no way to fund the other ones. Like they're like,
Yeah.
get angel investment. And it's like, okay, so you go to the people that you must know already and have them give you 100K for something that's not going to make them their 100K back. Like that's not going to work. Um,
Hmm.
so it's very depressing. And like
Yeah, yeah, and it's like and that is a place where it's like government support and assistance or like bank loans or things like that should be able to kind of like fill in, but it's like
yeah, well, and
yeah.
to the alternate timeline, again, Kamala Harris had a $50K small business grant thing in her platform, in her campaign that she talked about all of the time. So
Yeah.
anyway, let's
Anyway.
not get too deep into the alternate timeline. But yeah, so the one other point
Yes.
that I had on how they were talking about it on the 404 Media podcast, which is kind of a detailed thing, but like they went a lot into the fact that they basically have AI critique AI in the sense where they're building up these lessons plans, they have these faulty questions, and then they have like another LLM or even the same LLM with different prompts go back and just like proofread it basically. And on the 404 Media podcast, they're like, I don't understand how that makes any sense whatsoever, like
Yeah.
logically. And it's like, it does though, is the thing. It is possible for AI to catch its own errors. I have, in using Claude Code, even seen it just like in the course of running it without me doing anything, make a code change. And then the next turn it comes back and is like, wait, no, that's wrong. That's
Yeah.
the wrong way around. So
Yeah. I feel like this like it's a weird decay problem in a way though, where it is very much you are going to see an increasing error rate because that's why that's kind of why if you feed images into AI continuously, they wind up just looking really weird because that's
yeah,
kind of
but
like the
again, like
10% error rate just like compounding on itself.
yeah, like it doesn't work that way though. Like again, I've done this a whole bunch, and that's not what happens.
Oh, the thing is because and like I said, because there's like probably like a level of like biasing towards like, okay, like you're assuming that what I'm feeding you is correct. Now only find the things that are wrong versus generate something completely from scratch kind of
Yeah,
stuff. It's like, but I also like I don't fully believe the AI can correct itself and always
not always for sure, but
no,
like
definitely not always, but like the like AI can correct itself. Its capability of getting the corrections right, I feel like it's still going to get like there's still an error point there. Like there's
yeah,
still
like there
just
for
like
sure is still errors. Like it's not gonna find
yeah,
all of them, but like
yeah,
again, I've done this method of in a few different things, both just like in Claude Code, being like, go check
mm-hmm,
yourself a second time, or in
yeah,
Zuka when I was working on it, being like, okay, you came up with a formula, like now run a sanity check on it. Like especially if you're doing a completely different instance of the LLM, throwing away all the context that you gave the first one and being like, look at this from scratch. And then also
yeah,
giving it a prompt of guidance. It's just like, please check. And you give it a list of things to check. Whereas it's like, is it consistent? Is it grammatical? And things like that. So it knows what to look at for like,
yeah,
as it's editing it, basically. And that does tend to be pretty effective. So like, it's not just like having AI do the same thing again and it does the same way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I don't know. I feel like there is just still kind of like this. Like you need a human to come and look at it
Yeah.
at some
Like
point in
again,
time.
don't disagree with that. There's still going
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
some percentage of error and it's never going to be completely right. It was just like the very specific thing they were talking about of being like having AI QA itself basically is just fundamentally illogical. And I don't think it's fundamentally illogical. I think that does actually work pretty effectively in a lot of cases. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, it's just like yeah. I don't know. Like it'd be a very interesting study to do to like AI generate a piece of text and just like feed it through like AI proofreaders and see like what is the like what's the horizon on when you can go from AI piece of text with errors in it or even just like feed AI a piece of text with errors in it
mhm.
and like a known quantity of errors and see how many times you have to run it through AI proofreading before it's error free
Yeah.
and like and what level of like inadvertent drift do you wind up with then? Like what level of kind of like false positives in corrections do you wind up
Yep.
with? And then yeah, and like how does that compare then to like a human editing the same thing? It's like I'd be interested to see that experiment.
Yeah. And the going back to the thing that I linked, the how to pull quotes effectively one,
Yeah.
she actually has a like go QA yourself prompt in there basically, which is
Hmm.
um quote verification and like a prompt that says
Mm.
like after your initial analysis use this verification prompt to have the LLM confirm that these are real quotes that says like
Yeah.
specific prompts for each quote in the analysis confirm the quote exists verbatim if the quote is close paraphrase but not exact flag it and provide the actual word If the quote cannot be located, mark it as not found, and that gives it specific format to output. And so it does actually like catch a bunch of paraphrases and things like that. And like even in her example, there's one that is not quite right, to your point, where it's just like it calls out it's hard to start again as a paraphrase, but it does say that it's hard to start again. That's just one clause of a sentence that exists. So it's not really a paraphrase. It is kind of like quoting it out of context a little bit, but so like, yeah, but it does, like, again, like if you give the LLM a different set of context and explicit instructions on like what correcting looks like, it does behave differently than it did when the thing generated it the first time. So
yeah,
it does.
Yeah. It understands the difference between generation and editing, but I still want to see that experiment.
Yeah,
of
like I do think there's probably something about that. We could look it up. How many passes of just like verifying need to be done, and if that's effective or not. And I think it depends is the answer to that question, probably.
Yeah. Well, again, I do want to be clear. It's like I wouldn't want to run that study just for like how many passes of verification. I would also want to watch it for drift.
Yes, that too. And like, so, is it worse after 3 passes of verification than it was after 1 or 0? Yeah, I think that's super interesting.
A fascinating study. I would love. I'm sure it's been done somewhere, but it's like I would love to see the results.
It does have. That's what I mean by it depends. Is I'm sure it's domain specific, and it depends on what your verification prompt looks like exactly, and etc.
And also what model are you using? And
the Alpha School stuff. It is very interesting because it's just like. Again, I do think we need to figure out a better way to do education because our education system is a mess. And I don't know that I necessarily believe that what they're doing is even worse than a lot of existing systems, depending on how you're measuring. Like the surveillance state stuff is bad, but there's some of that in regular schools too, I think, at this point. So I was definitely reading about like school monitoring platforms where you're just like you're using social media on school computers. They will be monitoring all of your messages so that if you're expressing suicidal intent or whatever, it will flag it to a school administrator for you. There are like surveillance system companies that do that already for schools in general. So like that's something that exists already too. And like I mentioned, you get low quality multiple choice questions that aren't actually teaching you anything is a problem that has existed for at least like 30 years. So I don't know.
No, it's definitely one of those things where it's like I applaud your intention, like your stated intention here, but I feel like there's better ways you could be going about this.
I hope that this reporting will help them correct a little bit because people are kind of sensitive to public perception here.
Well, and especially like the surveillance piece with children specifically, I feel like is very much one of those things of like people are more sensitive to that sort of thing.
Another mostly unrelated thing, but related to Super Bowl ads, the Ring one that everyone hated.
Oh yeah.
The dog finding one. Everyone hated it, and in fact, they like canceled a partnership with Flock post it, and have been changing a lot of their strategy because no one liked that. 404 Media also had some reporting there where it's just like obviously they're meant it to be used for more than dogs. Eventually, they had some quotes from leadership being like, "This system first for dogs, etc., will help us eliminate all crime in neighborhoods." So it's just like. But it turns out people still don't like the surveillance state, which is nice. We haven't fully like accepted that that's the world we live in yet, which is nice, I guess.
Yeah. There's some hope for the future.
Thank you for listening to the Fast and Broken podcast. I'm Carly Rector, and if you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter at carlyrector.substack.com.
And I've been Teresa Kramer. If you want my voice on your products, you can visit my website at teresakramer.com.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, leave us a like or a review. It lets us know people are listening and helps more people find the podcast. See you next week.
Bye-bye.